For over 2,000 years, billions of Christians have dreamed of heaven as the ultimate paradise, eternal bliss, perfect peace, reunion with loved ones. It's the promise that shaped entire civilizations. Churches across every denomination have painted heaven as humanity's greatest reward. Theologians have dedicated their lives to describing its glories. Biblical scholars have filled libraries with commentaries about its perfection. Even secular culture can't escape it. Movies show us clouds and harps. Art depicts angels and endless happiness. We've all grown up with this image burned into our consciousness. We're taught that heaven represents everything good. No pain, no suffering, no death. The perfect existence we all desperately crave after a lifetime of struggle and loss. It sounds beautiful, doesn't it? But here's the thing. When you actually examine the biblical descriptions of heaven, when you read what the scriptures actually say about this so-called paradise, something deeply disturbing emerges. Details that sound less like paradise and more like a perfectly designed psychological prison. Elements that would make any reasonable person question whether they'd actually want to spend eternity there. Today, I'm going to show you exactly what the Bible actually says about heaven. Not what your pastor told you. Not what you learned in Sunday school. What's actually written in the text. And when we're done, you'll understand why these descriptions reveal something terrifying that churches don't want you to see. Something that changes everything about how we think about the afterlife. If you're ready to question everything you've been taught about eternity, if you can handle having your most fundamental beliefs challenged by the very book that created them, hit that subscribe button now. Because what comes next will completely change how you see heaven forever. Let's start with what seems like the most beautiful promise in Christianity, but becomes absolutely horrifying when you realize what it actually means. The Bible tells us that in heaven, we'll worship God forever, day and night, without ceasing, for all eternity. Sounds spiritual, right? Sounds holy? Well, let's talk about what that really looks like. Forced repetition without choice is a recognized form of psychological torture. It breaks down individual identity. It destroys the sense of self. It's literally used in brainwashing techniques and totalitarian control systems. Think about it. What makes you you? Your thoughts, your choices, your ability to change your mind, to grow, to experience different things, your personal preferences, your individual reactions, your unique perspective on life. Now imagine all of that gone. Instead, you have one thought, one purpose, one eternal, unchanging focus. Holy, holy, holy. That's not consciousness as we understand it. That's not you anymore. That's a programmed response in a body that used to be yours. And here's what's truly disturbing. The Bible presents this as a reward. No sleep means no dreams, no subconscious processing, no mental rest, no personal time means no reflection, no growth, no individual experience. You become nothing more than a worship machine. Your personality, erased. Your individual will, gone. Your capacity for independent thought, eliminated. This isn't paradise. This is the complete annihilation of everything that makes you human. And if you think that sounds extreme, consider this. In every totalitarian regime throughout history, the goal has been the same. Break down individual identity. Create uniform, unquestioning obedience. Eliminate personal choice. The only difference is that earthly dictators eventually die. This system, It's eternal. But here's what's even more chilling about biblical heaven. Forced eternal worship is just the beginning. The Bible describes something even more psychologically devastating about heaven's inhabitants, something that makes the worship problem look almost merciful by comparison. Think about your most precious memory right now. Maybe it's your wedding day, the birth of your child, a moment with a loved one who's no longer here. That time, you overcame something that seemed impossible. These memories, they're not just experiences. They're literally who you are. Your identity is built from the sum of everything you've lived through, every relationship you've formed, every lesson you've learned, every moment that shaped your character. Now here's what the Bible says happens to all of that in heaven. It gets completely erased. Revelation 21, verse 4, tells us that in the new heaven and new earth, there will be no more death, mourning, crying, or pain, for the former things have passed away. Isaiah 65:17 is even more explicit. The former things will not be remembered, nor will they come to mind. Not remembered, not even coming to mind. Your mother's face? Gone. The day you fell in love? Erased. The struggles that made you strong? Meaningless. Every relationship that defined you? As if it never happened. But wait, isn't this supposed to be about reuniting with loved ones in paradise? Here's the psychological trap most people miss. You can't have meaningful relationships with people you don't remember. You can't love someone whose history with you has been wiped clean. That person standing next to you in heaven, they might have been your spouse of 50 years. But you won't remember your first kiss. You won't remember the fights you worked through. You won't remember growing old together. You'll be strangers wearing familiar faces, and that's assuming you even recognize them at all. Because if your earthly memories are gone, what exactly makes them to you? This isn't reunion. This is meeting strangers who share your genetics. Your children become random people you happen to stand next to. Your parents become anonymous figures in the crowd. Every meaningful relationship in your life gets reduced to nothing. But here's what's truly horrifying about this memory wipe. It's not accidental. It's necessary. Because if you remembered your earthly life, if you remembered the people you loved who didn't make it to heaven, you'd be heartbroken. You'd be devastated. You'd be asking uncomfortable questions about God's justice. So the solution, make you forget they ever existed. Your grandfather, who wasn't quite religious enough. Your best friend, who had different beliefs. Your child, who died too young to accept Jesus. Poof. Gone from your mind forever. The Bible doesn't present this as loss. It presents this as liberation. Freedom from earthly attachments. But when you strip away the religious language, what are we really talking about? We're talking about forcible amnesia, systematic identity destruction, the complete elimination of everything that made you, you. You walk into heaven as yourself. But the person doing that eternal worship we talked about, that's not you anymore. That's a blank slate wearing your body. The erasure of human identity leads to perhaps the most chilling aspect of biblical heaven. What happens to human emotions and individual will when this supposedly perfect system is done with you? In psychology, we have a term for this: depersonalization. The feeling that you're not really you anymore, that you're watching your life from the outside, disconnected from your own experience. Except in heaven, it's not a disorder to be treated. It's the goal. And here's the truly disturbing part. This isn't an unfortunate side effect of removing pain. This is necessary for the system to work. Because if you could still feel authentic emotions, if you still had human desires and drives, you'd start asking questions. You'd wonder why you can't remember your loved ones. You'd feel uncomfortable with the endless repetition. You'd want something other than worship. So the solution? Remove your capacity to want anything. Turn you into something that can't feel dissatisfaction, because it can't feel anything. You become emotionally lobotomized, programmed, regulated, a perfectly controlled being that can't suffer, because it can't truly experience anything. This isn't healing. This isn't perfection. This is the systematic removal of everything that makes experience meaningful. You're left with consciousness without content, existence without experience, life without life. This emotional control serves a darker purpose when you examine who's actually in charge of this so-called paradise and what they demand from these emotionally neutered subjects. It's the ultimate panopticon. You're being watched and judged every second of every day for eternity. And unlike human dictators, who at least pretend to serve the people, this system doesn't even bother with that fiction. You exist to serve, to worship, to obey. Your needs, your wants, your individual perspective, completely irrelevant. In fact, as we've seen, the system actively eliminates your capacity to have individual perspective. You're not citizens in this kingdom. You're not even subjects. You're property. Conscious property whose only function is to provide worship and validation to the ruler. And here's the truly insidious part. This complete subjugation is presented as the ultimate reward, the greatest possible blessing, the thing you should spend your entire life trying to earn. Imagine if North Korea told its citizens, work harder, obey completely, and maybe, if you're good enough, you can spend eternity in an even more controlled version of this system. You'd recognize that as psychological manipulation immediately, but wrap it in religious language, call the dictator God, and suddenly billions of people see it as paradise. It's brilliant, really. A control system so perfect that the victims beg to be included in it. This totalitarian structure becomes even more sinister when you realize what happens to those who don't make it to this so-called paradise, and how their suffering serves as entertainment for the perfectly controlled subjects above. You're watching people you once knew, maybe people you once loved, being tortured forever. Your old neighbors, your co-workers, your family members who didn't believe quite the right thing. And not only are you not bothered by this, you're enjoying it. What kind of being finds pleasure in watching eternal torture? In any other context, we'd call this sadism. We'd recognize it as a severe psychological disorder. Someone who enjoys watching others suffer would be considered a psychopath. But in heaven, it's presented as righteousness, as justice, as something to celebrate. This isn't just the absence of empathy we talked about earlier. This is active cruelty, active pleasure in the pain of others. And remember, this is supposed to be you, the perfected version of you, the version that's closer to God. The Bible is telling us that when you become like God, you become someone who enjoys watching torture, someone who sees eternal suffering and thinks, good, they deserved it. What does that tell us about the nature of this God? What does it tell us about what holiness actually means in this system? It means that the highest virtue is sadism. The most godly response to suffering is pleasure. The mark of righteousness is the ability to watch torture without flinching. Better yet, to smile while you watch. This isn't moral perfection. This is moral inversion. Everything we understand about compassion, mercy, and basic human decency, reversed. When you step back and look at all these elements together, the forced worship, the memory erasure, the emotional lobotomy, the totalitarian control, and now the sadistic entertainment system, a terrifying pattern emerges about what heaven really represents. Let's take a step back for a moment and look at what we've uncovered. We started with the promise of eternal paradise, but when we examined what the Bible actually describes, we found something completely different. First, there's the worship. Not occasional praise, not heartfelt gratitude, but forced, repetitive behavior without any choice in the matter. Day and night, forever. Your individual will gone. Then we discovered the memory wipe. Everything that made you you, your relationships, your experiences, your personal history, systematically erased. You become a stranger to yourself. Next came the emotional lobotomy. No sadness, but also no real joy. No pain, but also no authentic pleasure. Just flatness, clinical numbness, the complete elimination of human feeling. We saw the totalitarian control structure, absolute power, total surveillance, zero tolerance for questioning. A dictatorship so complete it makes earthly tyrannies look amateur. And then, perhaps most disturbing of all, the sadistic entertainment. The blessed watching the damned suffer, not with sorrow or compassion, but with pleasure, finding joy in eternal torture. Now here's what's truly chilling about all this. Every single one of these elements is recognized by psychologists as a form of severe psychological torture. Forced repetitive behavior? That's how you break someone's mind. Memory erasure? That's identity destruction. Emotional numbing? That's depersonalization. Total surveillance? That's psychological terrorism. Taking pleasure in others' suffering? That's clinical sadism. Put them all together, and what do you have? The most perfect psychological hell ever designed. But here's the genius of it all. It's not called hell, it's called heaven. It's presented as the ultimate reward instead of the ultimate punishment. Think about traditional hell for a moment. Fire, brimstone, eternal torture. It sounds awful, right? But at least in hell, you're still you. Your memory's intact. Your personality preserved. Your capacity to feel genuine emotion still there. You suffer? Yes. But you suffer as yourself. In heaven, the suffering is different, more subtle, more complete. You don't burn. You simply cease to exist as an individual. You don't scream in agony. You lose the capacity to feel anything authentic at all. It's not torture of the body. It's torture of the soul. The complete annihilation of everything that makes you human, while your consciousness remains to experience nothing. The difference between heaven and hell isn't the presence or absence of suffering. It's just how that suffering is packaged. Hell promises to hurt you. Heaven promises to delete you. And somehow, we're supposed to prefer deletion. This realization leads to the most disturbing question of all. What does this say about the entire system that presents such choices as divine justice? So what's really going on here? When you look at the whole picture, heaven and hell aren't actually opposites. They're two different methods of achieving the same goal: the elimination of authentic human experience. Think about it. In hell, you're tortured until you break. Your spirit gets crushed, your will gets destroyed, your sense of self gets obliterated through suffering. In heaven, you're perfected until you disappear. Your memories get erased, your emotions get numbed, your individuality gets systematically removed through bliss. Either way, the real you doesn't survive. It's like being offered a choice between drowning and suffocating. The method is different, but the end result, you're still dead. And here's what's truly brilliant about this system. Most people don't even recognize it as a choice between two forms of annihilation. They see it as good versus evil, reward versus punishment, paradise versus torture. But when you strip away the religious packaging, you realize you're looking at a control system designed to eliminate the one thing that makes humans dangerous to authority: independent thought, individual will, the capacity to question and resist. Heaven doesn't preserve these qualities. It destroys them just as effectively as hell does. Maybe more effectively, because at least people in hell might still have the desire to rebel. The people in heaven, they can't even remember what rebellion feels like. We've been conditioned to see this psychological extinction as the highest possible achievement, the ultimate goal of human existence, and millions of people spend their entire lives trying to earn the right to stop being themselves. If this analysis has opened your eyes to what's hidden in plain sight, hit subscribe and share this video with someone who needs to see it. Because once you see the truth about heaven, you can never unsee it. And honestly, that might be the most liberating realization of all. The most disturbing truth isn't that heaven might be hell. It's that we've been taught to desire our own psychological extinction and call it paradise. Ask questions about the selected content